I am here with John Cartwright and Brandon Miracle, and it's time to talk about the top 10 Nintendo 64 games of all time as voted by all of you. And right off the bat, we were talking last week about how many records the PS1 broke. It was just the most amount of votes so far, the widest variety of games, and the Nintendo 64 broke one of those because there's no way it's going to beat the variety of games. We looked it up, and the variety of games mentioned for the PS1 top 10 was more than the total games ever released on the Nintendo 64 in total.
Oof.
So that's your PS1 nostalgia for you. However, vote wise, nearly doubled it because we got 1,244 votes for this system.
Hold the phone. Have we got Nintendo fans in our audience?
No, I perished the thought, but apparently they're here. So yeah, nearly doubled the 765 from PlayStation. However, while PlayStation had 426 different games mentioned, there were only 182 different games mentioned for the Nintendo 64. About half of the available games total, because there were, 388 total games released for the N64.
So. More games than I thought there would be. I was wondering whether we'd reach 50. N64 has a great library, but it's the problem a few Nintendo consoles have, where everyone just plays the same thing. So everyone's top 10 list tends to be, different in placements, but the games always tend to be around the same.
Yeah, as a kid, I can recall having a couple of weirdo third-party games that you've probably never heard of, but I, like John, the games that people are gonna vote on are the ones that I remember the most.
Yeah, I mean, I kept putting, I always offer up the vote forms to you guys as well, and you kept saying, Brandon's I can't join. So that's why you're here. You're finally able to join. This is sort of your first big system, right?
Yeah, for a little bit of context. Now, I did have a Super Nintendo growing up, but I was, let's see, I had to have been 3 or 4 years old when I got my Super Nintendo. It was a hand-me-down from my older brother. So all the games that he had, I didn't get any new games. What we had is what we had. So, my experience was fairly limited. It was wide because, we had a lot of games, just, not a lot of the big ones that you would think. We had no RPGs at all. We had Super Mario World, we had Mario All-Stars, Yoshi's Island, Link to the Past. And that was basically it for Nintendo First Party, Super Mario Kart. So yeah, my experiences were a little closed off. The N64 is the first console I actively remember my dad going out and getting for me. We had this behavior system in kindergarten. You had your green light, yellow light, and your red light. If you're a green light, you were a good egg. I never got off the green light the entire year. So as a reward for my good behavior, my dad bought me a 64.
My parents never got me reward presents for kindergarten.
Yeah, I know, right?
Maybe he was going to do it anyway. I don't know, but that's what he told me.
I was just maybe. He's like, I want this, but I'm going to blame it on the kid.
But back then, I only had so much control over what games ended up, in my house.
Yeah.
Your parents are going to buy whatever they're going to buy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
That was my NES and Genesis days. I picked out a few, but the commercials hit me, but the otherwise they were like, well, he might like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm glad that I can finally participate.
Yay. All right. That's awesome. But yeah, we have 10 games here that made the top of the list, and we're going to run through them all and have you guys predict which ones you think made it to each spot. So let's get this started. John, Brandon, what was the number 10 game of all time for the Nintendo 64?
I want this to be higher, but I think F-Zero X might place around this point.
Okay. I I'm still debating my like 8, 9, and 10. Actually, let's see. You know what? I'm gonna say this one not because I think it'll like place highly or even in the top 10, but this is a personal vendetta. I'm gonna say Diddy Kong Racing at number 10.
Okay. It is neither of those. At number 10, GoldenEye 007.
That's
Oh.
shocking.
1,000. Yeah. What that's that high that it's in the top 10 or that it's
No.
that
I
low
think
in
it.
the
I
top
think it
10?
deserves to be in the top 10. I think GoldenEye is
Okay.
great. I thought it would be top 5.
Oh wow. Yeah, already a bit of a surprise for you.
Yeah.
I'll be
So-
honest. GoldenEye didn't even come to mind.
Really?
This is not one of the games I had as a kid. I told in my Christmas story that I played this game with my grandpa, but this was at my grandpa's house. This was his game.
Man. My
Yeah.
friends and I were late to the N64 multiplayer era, and I remember going back to it when we were teenagers, and we just played GoldenEye like until the break of dawn, and we're talking like 10 years after it came out. It's so fun. Like if you view it like a Doom game, I think the controls kind of hold up pretty well. If you treat it like a dual stick game, they don't. But just being able to play as a single stick shooter where you like look like where you're looking is what you're shooting, I think that works great still. It's when you try and modernize it that it falls apart. But the multiplayer still holds up so well.
I've not tried it on the NSO since I got an actual N64 controller for the Switch. So I wonder if that'll cover my expectations because I didn't grow up with an N64, and I only knew through osmosis that my friends who did have an N64, or at least the people I knew in school who were playing it at the time, loved it. They were constantly talking about how much fun GoldenEye was, and I just
It's like the
completely
multiplayer
skipped me
game.
by.
Like there's
Yeah.
a few multiplayer games, but I think GoldenEye kind of trumps most of them. Like that's my go-to
To the
one.
point that you don't really hear much about the campaign. There's
Yeah.
a bit. The campaign, as far as I know, is good. But
It is
everybody
good.
just talks about the multiplayer.
It's got that rare design of like different objectives within it, so like they're kind of like sandboxes while also being linear levels. But yeah, the multiplayer was sort of tacked on. It was just they took the single player levels and made them into little maps, and that somehow became the what defined it.
Yeah,
And those locations for me are what, weirdly enough, I think are what are most memorable. Because some of those maps they weren't necessarily big, but they were like dense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And being able to navigate them in multiplayer, even though you could like screen peek and everybody was on the same screen, I don't know. There was still something.
yeah.
It is, but there was
It's
still
how you
something
sort of-
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that. There's good memories left with those where you're just trying to you find those find it, and it's I guess this really did mark the first time a console FPS really stood out.
Yeah, and it was a licensed game that came out like a year after the movie or something.
I always forget that it was so long after the movie.
Yeah, I personally prefer it to Perfect Dark, which is also a great game, but I think GoldenEye just has a flow that Perfect Dark doesn't quite get.
Yeah. Oh wow, 2 years according to Grant
Oh,
and
geez.
live
Okay.
audience. So, yeah, quite a ways. But yeah, that our benchmark here is 1,775 points.
That's like
So-
that's more than some
Wow.
got a number one.
Yeah, exactly. That's yeah, a lot of votes. So, but let's go ahead and get to number 9. What is our number 9 game of all time for the Nintendo 64?
Super Smash Brothers.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
It's not what I put. Mine is Pokemon Snap.
That's a good choice.
Pokemon Snap. Okay. By the way, you can change your answers based on vibes and what gets in there, Brandon. You have
I
to write
haven't
it
got a
down
list.
beforehand.
I'm just calling
Yeah.
off games.
You're going gotta
Okay.
go. Sometimes you got to go from the heart here.
Okay.
I say that because, well, one, you're both wrong, and two, at number 9, Diddy Kong Racing.
Oh, it was so close.
The best kart racer on the N64.
Ooh.
Mario Kart
I-
64. It was fun in the era. We have come further. Battle mode's still great. The core driving feels really loose. Mario Kart's gotten better than 64, but there aren't many kart races that have gotten better than Diddy Kong Racing, though.
Diddy Kong Racing for me is like the full package for kart racing. You have the full single player adventure. You have the multiplayer. You have various types of battle modes. But for me, the thing about Diddy Kong Racing I've always loved the most is the core driving controls. I
Yeah.
think they're excellent. And when you get good at Diddy Kong Racing, it is so satisfying to play.
100%.
This game forces you to get good.
It
I
sure does.
came back to Diddy Kong years after the fact and played through the adventure mode with Amy, and because it's a childhood favorite of hers. She loves this game. I've never played it before, so it was an adjustment for me to get used to how Diddy Kong is different from Mario Kart.
Yeah.
And granted, it does feel better than Mario Kart, but by far. But it is, oh god, it is so hard. Like, that campaign is brutal. I remember spending hours trying to beat certain bosses,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, "This is the best campaign ever." I was like, "No, you're wrong.
I mean,
Crash Team Racing is a much better adventure
The
mode
fact that
single
it
player
has
campaign."
one at all, though, like most kart races, they're multiplayer, and then that's it.
Yes, that it makes it much more feature rich. I get it, but it is too hard for its own good. I appreciate Diddy Kong, but it is one of those games where the difficulty starts taking away from it for me.
Sure.
But
sure.
multiplayer, great fun. I mean, that's probably what you're gonna do most of the time anyway.
I think this worked back then because there wasn't a lot of like access to online and strategy guides and info and whatnot. But like as you progress through Diddy Kong Racing, they give you like advanced technique tips, like letting go of acceleration when you go over a boost, or holding the brake when you're going through a drift to precisely turn. They tell you that stuff slowly over the course of the game, and it would probably be easier if they just let you know from the beginning.
Yeah, that's for sure. They make you work for it. It's oof. But I also, it's one of those things where the character you choose really affects things, as everybody's just like, stick to these two or you're not going to win.
Don't play Crunch.
You gotta be
He's
tip-top.
bad. Mm-hmm.
What is it? Pipsy is the other one that's everybody's like one of the best racers.
The best
Poor
racer in
Banjo's
the
not.
game is you have to unlock by beating all the time trials.
Ugh.
TT.
Oh, right, TT. Oh God, it's a very impressive game, especially when you compare it directly to Mario Kart 64, because just the full 3D models and the levels, the fact you could fly and have the boat and all that stuff. So it's I was happy to see it make the number 9. I knew Brandon would be joining, so I knew he'd be happy to see it make
We've
the
got
top
to get
10.
you playing multiplayer sometime. I think you're too caught up on this campaign. There's a lovely multiplayer
I think
in
so.
there.
I think that's the issue. It did beat GoldenEye by about 175 points. It was at 1,946. So
Sheesh.
nearly 2,000 for Diddy Kong Racing alone.
Dang.
I'm so happy to hear it made the top 10. I set it at number 10 because I really just didn't think it was going to make it. But this feels good.
People want it on the NSO. People really want it on the
They do.
NSO. So we'll
Me.
see what happens.
I'm
yeah,
people.
you're people. All right. Well, let's get to number 8. This is our first big points jump. So Diddy Kong was at around 1,900. Mario Kart is at 2,600.
Is it Mario Kart?
Yes, I just.
Whoa.
John didn't even register.
No.
At number 8, which I just unfortunately spoiled for you guys, Mario Kart 64 with 2,652 points. My God, I'm trying to like build up mystery and I read out the damn thing.
It's more popular.
Anyway, Mario Kart at number 8.
It's more popular than Diddy Kong Racing. It's not better than Diddy Kong Racing. Mario Kart 64 has its charm. It's got great tracks. Battle mode is fantastic still. But just going back to play it, I think their memories will be torn apart.
It does not have the game feel for me.
No.
Like when I get down to it between Diddy Kong and Mario Kart, game feels the most important part for me, and Diddy Kong has it. It has it in spades.
Yeah, 100%.
Hmm.
It's not a bad game. Like Mario Kart 64, you
No,
can go
not at
back,
all.
you can relearn the slippery controls. It can be fun. But then there's also limitations like 4-player, where the music just goes and like there's bob-ombs everywhere. Like it's a pretty limited multiplayer game.
Yeah, and it has a lot of oddities to it. Like you fall off the track, they're going to punish you for that because it takes forever to get back on. You have the it's much more easy to spin out. Like it's a bit more brutal than you
Yeah.
remember.
Mhm.
Like that will throw you off. I distinctly remember not growing up with Mario Kart 64. Again, not having it at 64 when I grew up, and first playing it any real capacity other than with my friends a little bit on the virtual console on the Wii. And I remember playing through and being like, this is what everybody loves. This kind of sucks. Like it's not terrible, but compared to what was available at the time, which I think was probably DS, yeah, I was not impressed.
Mhm.
64 has probably the most egregious like AI rubber banding.
Oh, yeah, it does.
It's pretty awful.
Yeah.
Like you can say Diddy Kong Racing is a hard game, but Mario Kart's just straight up unfair.
Yeah. Now, there's
Yeah.
there's cool
I
parts.
I don't
Like
I
like there's
yeah,
that
I
one
don't want to
track.
crap on this game. The
Yeah.
courses are good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's that track where you can go off the course and just explore Peach's castle. That's a cool one.
I love that.
Yeah, and that was
Mhm.
blocked off in 8. The Wii U didn't want you to do that.
Yeah.
I love the version of Bowser's Castle in Mario Kart 64.
Yeah.
Just going down the big staircase, you have the thwomps. There's the green thwomp behind the bars, where there was a big internet conspiracy about being able to open it and letting him out.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And Toad was a cowboy in this game. He'd go like,
Oh, yeah.
he'd have like a southern accent.
Wahoo!
Yeah.
something like that. I think this is notable because I think this is what made Mario Kart more of a franchise. It's like, okay, this is our big one. Like I get a sequel, I don't know how many years later from Super Mario Kart to keep it going. Is like, oh, okay, this is a big deal to have Mario Kart because I remember at the time everybody was talking Mario Kart. And it's just as big of a deal for Mario Kart's always a big deal in each system it comes out on.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Super Mario Kart was a game. Mario Kart 64 was an event.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, I think a lot of people have shared like the same memories of, you know, you and your friends all huddled around the CRT on Block Fort playing battle mode. Like
Yeah.
it just exudes vibes, right? And I think that nostalgia definitely carries it forward some, which is not a
Mhm.
bad thing. I think some people
No.
use nostalgia as like a negative point, but I see it the other way.
Yeah.
Not my preferred kart
Yeah.
racer, but it's still a good game.
Yeah, I think that's that's been a new narrative popping up that I've really enjoyed, where it's like your favorite game are games or somebody else's like 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. Like it's what you brought to the table with it, what you discovered with it, and Mario Kart 64 is can absolutely be one of those games. So yeah, so let's see if I can not. I'm like really cautious now about not screwing this up. So. Number 7, Brandon, John, what are your predictions? I'm not getting into points or anything like that. Just what do you think is at number 7
You
for the
didn't tell us the
Nintendo
game this
64?
time. Well, I wanted Sin and Punishment to be here, but we've had Mario Kart and Diddy Kong Racing. So it's probably not going to go ahead of that. So I'm gonna bring back F-Zero X.
Mine is Super Smash Brothers.
Okay, bring back 2 guesses.
All right. You brought back 2 guesses. Both guesses are wrong. At number 7, Star Fox 64.
Oh,
I thought that'd be a bit higher.
can I tell you that's my number 6?
That's fine. We can choose a new number 6 now. Yeah, it beat out Mario Kart by about 250 points.
Yeah, it deserves to have. Star Fox is like a really good example of just doing everything better. Like the original Star Fox and
Yeah.
Super Nintendo, iconic game. But it's also it was pushing the limits of Super Nintendo, and there were things it just wasn't capable of. Whereas this, it felt like it did everything it could have done. Hardware has progressed so far, but I don't think any hardware advancements would make Star Fox 64 a better game. It's just they had a vision and they did it.
Yeah, I guess the
Star
3DS
Fox
version kind of proved
64
that.
Star Fox 64 is so good, they've never topped it.
Yeah,
They just keep trying to
Yeah.
chase it, right?
exactly.
Star Fox 64 is infinitely replayable. I don't think I've ever been tired of just replaying Star Fox 64. The multiple paths, trying to get high scores to get the medals on every level, playing it on expert mode. There's a lot of ways to enjoy Star Fox 64. And that's not even touching on the multiplayer, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Speaking of multiplayer, Live Audience just asked if the 3DS remake tops it. Not in multiplayer. The 3DS multiplayer isn't that great. In terms of
different.
Yeah, it's different. In terms of like whether it's actually topped the main game, that's debatable. I think there's definitely a charm in not having a save feature and just learning the routes and like just memorizing the game as much as you can and mastering it. Because I think being able to save and restart a level, that kind of takes that away.
It's one of those
The-
things where, like, as a kid, like especially back in those days, you sit down, pop it in, play through as far as you can get. You lose. All right, I'll try again tomorrow. That
Yeah,
sort of
like
thing.
an
It's
arcade
one of
game.
those. Yeah, very much keeping that arcade feel. And again, this was one that came up in the playground a lot of
Yeah.
friends that had N64s and loved talking about the Star Fox multiplayer, which you don't hear brought up too much anymore, but it was a big thing at the time, at least in my circles.
Yeah, for sure.
Was a fun thing to play with your friends, and it's certainly meme worthy. Everybody knows the quotes.
Yeah.
It is ingrained in there, and I think it's the game that Nintendo can't stop remaking, but it's also the game that's the reason why everybody keeps wanting a new Star Fox, for them to go beyond this and find a way to just bring it back and be like this, but different.
Yeah, I mean, it also came with the
Mhm.
Rumble Pack. Did voice acting, which we
Yeah.
talked about, which very few N64 games do. It just felt epic and big, which they struggle to do with Star Fox now. They're kind of lacking that hook, and they don't know what to make as a hook.
The levels are snappy and memorable. That's something that they did not recapture with Star Fox Zero specifically. You know, it's the game's infinitely quotable. Like there's a script for every level, and I
Yeah.
don't feel like I don't feel that as much in Star Fox Zero.
Tell me one Star Fox Zero line. Just one.
Do a barrel roll.
Whereas you can tell me like 20 Star Fox 64 lines. It's so memorable. And it has those
repetitious
mix-up
part of it.
levels.
Like, you play those levels again, so you hear that stuff again and again. But
Yeah.
it's also,
Yeah.
you never get tired of it.
Yeah, like you get levels like the Landmaster and the submarine. Like it does mix up the core gimmick quite often, but it always stays loyal to what playing in an R-Wing is like, even if the mechanical differences change a bit.
There's also a level of emergent gameplay. Like, if you don't know the routes or you don't know the secrets, as you're playing it for the first time, the route you get, that's going to be special to you.
Yeah.
That's your first Star Fox
Yeah.
64 route.
Exactly.
To you, that's the core path. I remember the first time I finally figured out how to get to the left side of the Lilat system as a kid. And then going through the much more difficult, 2 finale levels of Star Fox 64, and then finally beating Andros and feeling so proud of myself that I finally did it. But that didn't stop me from playing more. At that point, I was like, all right, I've got other levels I've never played before. Now I need to figure out how to get to those.
Yeah. I saw some live audience
that's a
chatter
good-
about it being a 1-hour game, but that doesn't tell the full story. Like 1 hour to do a
No.
playthrough, but I think the best way to play Star Fox is not to share what others have done. Don't use a walkthrough. Just keep playing it yourself and mastering it, and then it's way more than an hour.
I remember I had one of my cousins over, and I could not figure out how to get to the secret exit of Corneria, because for what it is, it's kind of obtuse. You just fly through some archways, and then Falco's like, "Hey, that's pretty sick, Fox," and then he finds a different target, and you follow him. and there's very little to go on.
Yeah.
Like it does not intuit that very well to you. But my cousin knew about it, so he did it, and I was like, "Whoa,
That's the coolest thing ever."
yeah, it sure was." And the boss is sick because it's a Star Fox SNES boss.
Yeah. Yeah. It's. I expected it to make the top 10, and I'm glad it made the top 10.
Yeah, me too.
So.
Oh yeah.
All right. Number 6, with 3,669 points. Basically a little over 600 points above Star Fox 64.
I don't want to keep voting for F-Zero and Smash Brothers, but I feel like they should be in these spots. Smash.
In the interest of being different than John, I'll go with the other one that I have floating in the middle, Paper Mario.
I was thinking that too.
All right. At number 6, Super Smash Brothers.
Mm-hmm. So this came out in 99, correct?
Yes.
And then Melee was 2001. So there's a super small gap between the two. And it's hard not to compare them because Melee does so much more than the original does. The original is still a great game. It introduced the whole concept. You don't have like side specials. It feels a little bit limited and things were a little bit more rigid. But it is still like one of the go-to multiplayer games. But it's super hard not to see how close it was to Melee, though.
This is why I didn't play much Star Fox or Mario Kart multiplayer with my friends. It was Mario Party or Smash, and I loved playing through Smash. Like I would be staying over at my friend's house, and he'd like allow me, because again I didn't grow up with one, but I went through the break the targets and board the platforms, stuff like that. Like and go through the classic mode. There was something so different about it that just drew you in immediately, and it doesn't have all the bells and whistles and extra content that you get from the later games, but it's still pretty cool to unlock Luigi, Captain Falcon, Jigglypuff.
No one knew who Ness was. They're like, who's this other Pokemon trainer guy?
Only my friend knew who Ness was because he actually had a copy of Earthbound as well on his SNES. So he was actually like, "Oh my god!" It's like it was made for that one kid.
Yeah.
I have a distinct memory of being at my cousin's house, and I was looking through his games, and I pulled the cartridge for this one up, and it had Mario and Pikachu on the label, and I was like, "What the heck? Mario and Pikachu at the same time? Let's play this one." And it was love at first smash. I could never pull myself away from that game. It was all I wanted to play. And honestly, things haven't changed that much. I still love Smash to this day. It's an event. And I spent, I didn't really have siblings to play with in my household growing up, and my dad didn't really like fighting games, so Smash 64 was almost entirely a solo experience for me. But I still played it a lot because it was just fun.
This compared to some other multiplayer games in N64, this is just like an uncompromised 60 FPS, which is super rare for the system. Because with like Mario Kart, it's 30 FPS anyway, but then you get big performance drops. This is just flat 60, and it feels super, super good. Board the platforms. No, the Smash game does board the platforms. That's probably why it's on this list. But it is still fun to play. There's a small rigidness because you don't have your side specials and things just feel a little bit clunkier. But there was such a
sound
charm
effects
there.
are really unique too.
Yeah,
like there's this, like that crunchiness to the sound effects.
The bowling sound effects in the US
Yes.
version.
Yeah,
very much so.
We've also got things like character intros, like whenever you start a match, whereas Melee they just spawn in from nowhere.
It took a while for them to bring that back, but it was really cool. Mario come out of the pipe, Fox drop in, Link coming down with the light. It's so good, and I think you kind of have to mention, at least in the States, that commercial did a lot of work. You saw that for the first time when we were watching cartoons. All of a sudden, you got the happy Nintendo characters walking together, and all of a sudden they start beating the crap out of each other. It's like I got to play that. So, Yeah,
I
I expected Smash to make it to the top 10.
One of the things about Smash 64 I've always loved is its kind of comic book aesthetic.
Yeah.
That's something that
Yeah.
F-Zero did for a while, and Smash has never gone back to that. So, Smash
Yeah.
64 has a very specific identity, and part of it's because of that artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, that game's very comfy to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, the art style is very different when you look at you really look at the box art and especially look at Link. It has a very different art style. He's
Mhm.
very stringy.
Yeah.
Yeah, hard to argue with that one. So yeah, all right, we've reached the top 5. Our top 5 games for the Nintendo 64. John, Brandon, what came in at number 5?
I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna put down Paper Mario again.
I was thinking
Feeling
that
good about
too.
this.
It would be a sham if F-Zero X isn't on this list. But we're running out of spots, and I think the obvious games may be occupying those spots. I think I agree Paper Mario, so I'm going to give one more desperate cling to F-Zero. We'll see.
Okay. All right. At number 5, Paper Mario.
Yeah. Okay.
I finally got one.
Well, that's the thing, Brandon. You've been one before each time, like for a lot of these. Like you were.
I'm
just
surprised
one
how
off.
close I got. Yeah.
I mean, it's the RPG of the system. That's for sure.
Is this or Quest 64, right? Paper Mario, I think in many ways it's better than Thousand Year Door. I think Thousand Year Door I hold in a high regard for the most part, but like I like the identity of Paper Mario. I love the little spin. I love that you can sort of jump in out of it and get like more momentum going. It's just a really, really cozy one. It's not just that it's the only RPG on the system. It's a genuinely great one.
Paper Mario's version of the Mushroom Kingdom is my preferred version of the Mushroom Kingdom. I
Yeah.
look at Toad Town
Mhm.
and I love the music and it's just the happy vibes that place gives off. Like whenever I've thought of the Mushroom Kingdom, this is the one that comes to mind for me. One of the big things that I think Paper Mario 64 does better than Thousand Year Door is level
Yeah.
design and world design. Paper Mario is a lot of hallways from left to right, or Thousand Year Door is a lot of hallways from left to right, and that's fine. But no, Paper Mario just feels fuller to me.
I agree.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's the traditional classic Mario versus Bowser, but they make Bowser feel like an actual threat.
Yeah.
Mario
And
gets beat
Yeah.
in the
We'd
beginning
never
of the
had
game.
this before, really. Like
Yeah.
Mario RPG has, a more elaborate Mario adventure, but it's not the classic story. Whereas this is like the first time they actually elaborated on Mario versus Bowser, and it feels cool and epic. And there still aren't that many examples of this.
Not
Bowser's
really.
like still a dope,
Yeah.
but they make him a threat for the first time.
Yeah.
And I love
Yeah.
that.
And you lose at
have
the
this-
beginning, which is like a trope I love. But this is
Mhm.
one of the first games I think about when thinking about that trope.
Yeah, it's a really good example of it because you have that sort of classic intro of going to the castle, very reminiscent of Mario 64. You have all these characters that you'll eventually meet, and then it all goes down, and then it's like adventure, adventure, adventure,
Yeah.
and it's all stuff that really could pull you in as a kid, adult, wherever. It's just timeless in its way of drawing you in and having interesting systems and
Yeah.
still being an RPG but being very different from what Mario RPG offered with its traditional party system. This very much carved out its own identity, and it doesn't take advantage of the paper effects as much with this original game.
Doesn't even feel
But
like
it's-
paper most of the time.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's just an explanation for keeping it simple, but
Yeah.
it kind of as an aesthetic it works.
Yeah,
It does the job, and the badge system
it's so
probably
good.
one of the best systems they ever came up with, just
Yeah.
to have
Mhm.
that variety of like, are you going to take it on this time? How are you going to build your Mario? Are you going to focus on HP or
It's really
FP
good.
or your badge points?
Yeah.
It's oddly replayable.
In most RPGs, like you deal 7,000 damage, you're like, oh, what an attack. But in Paper Mario, you deal like 7, and you're like, whoa, did you see that 7? One thing about the 64 game is that, like, when we're playing it, like, one negative is it takes a long time to get your action commands. So it takes like an hour or two until you can actually press A to deal more damage or guard. But once you're in there, though, I think it's just delightful.
Very much
It is. As much as I love the party members, another negative, I guess, is that, they don't really have an active role in the story after they've joined your team.
Yeah, they don't have a personality whatsoever after they're in.
But I still love those
their
designs.
functions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
One of the other things about Paper Mario that I don't think gets enough credit is, the story has a lot to do with the stars, and you have the star spirits. The stars being kind of a mythical, like, legendary thing is explored here, and then that just becomes a part of the Mario universe from that point on.
Yeah.
Like Rosalina, I feel like doesn't happen without this happening first.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and there's a mythical quality, I guess, added to the Mushroom Kingdom that we didn't have before, and it's appreciated. It's fun, hard to argue. Yeah, this is absolutely a top 10.
Yeah.
Mario, N64 game.
Totally.
So, all right, well, time to get to number 4. Only beating out Paper Mario by 150 points.
This is really tough. Because I think the game I'm about to say is often heralded as like the best one on the system, but it has this predecessor which is a lot more famous. So I'm going to say Majora's Mask for this one.
I was teetering between 2. Majora's Mask was 1.
Yeah.
The other is Banjo-Kazooie.
That's exactly what I was thinking, man.
Yeah.
Number 4, Banjo-Kazooie.
Okay. Respectable.
Yeah. I think everybody expected Banjo to make it into the top 10. It is like almost the premier platformer on the system.
Yeah.
And looking through what has made the top 10 and what we can all expect from the rest of the list, it really does show that the N64 was dominated by 2 things: Nintendo and Rare.
Oh, yeah.
And this is often held up as Rare's finest showing.
I mean, some people think it's better than Mario 64, and like to be even comparable, like, of course that's top 5 quality.
Yeah. Banjo-Kazooie is so colorful. It's an actual adventure. It leans so hard into its own identity. And I'm not trying to make a pun here, but I think that was rare for the time.
Yeah.
It felt for an applause after that.
There's an epic quality to it. Like, yeah, with Mario, you're dropped off in front of the castle and you run in and you start doing your levels and you get kicked out for each individual star. But with Banjo, you build up your abilities. You go up Spiral Mountain. You go into Gruntilda's lair and you have to start figuring out how to go through it. Like, the whole process is an adventure rather than just sort of poking around a castle.
Yeah. I guess it depends what you want, right? Because, like, Banjo is a constantly evolving game, whereas Mario 64 is a bit more static, but a lot more flexible in the moves. You can accomplish a lot more in Mario if you're really good and get a handle of the moves. But with Banjo, you're constantly getting new moves, like being able to, go on Kazooie's legs and climb up a slope or fly in the air. Like, it feels like more of a grand web that you're unweaving, like an adventure. And I love both games. I never know quite which I prefer. I think Mario 64 I do prefer, but Banjo is just phenomenal.
I think Banjo does start to fall apart a little bit in some of its later levels. Is Rusty Bucket Bay? Is that right?
I think that's the one that has the instant. It's the level that makes you bemoan the fact that it does not save your notes, and you have to recollect all the notes every time you die. And there's that one section where it's really easy to die.
So I guess you can play that if you want to. But yeah, on N64, you're screwed.
I think that's just a bad level. Like, I'm gonna be honest. But most of the other levels are super fun and memorable. Freeze Easy Peak, love that. That is the most Christmas level ever added
Oh
to a
yeah.
video
Oh
game.
yeah. And
Um,
there's also like a Halloweeny level. There's a few like holiday themed
Yeah.
banjo
yeah,
levels.
I mean, there's a level based around the seasons, which again is huge
Yeah.
and will take you a while to collect everything, but it gets those vibes right. And to see the time passing
Yeah.
is such a unique idea.
Click
Like-
Clock Wood also has one of the best theme songs ever. I love that song.
Yeah.
But that is another level I think that that isn't as popular just because there's a lot you have to do to make it through that one.
Mhm.
There's also the infamous quiz right at the end of the game, um, which, as funny as like a set piece as it is, probably not the best idea in practice.
No.
But the vast majority of Banjo-Kazooie is excellent. There's a
Mhm.
little bit of that hop into a level and leave, that Mario 64 has. Like, once you've collected enough jiggies and you have access to the next puzzle, you can put the puzzle together and jump in that level and then move on. It's not quite as flexible, but it is still to a degree.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think one thing I do it does lack bosses. There's not a lot of bosses to the game.
True.
Grunty's definitely a standout boss at the end, but up to that point, you don't have the sheer variety of bosses that Mario offers up in the same way. So, they each have their own strengths and weaknesses, and it really comes down to personal taste. But I mean, there's no denying that Banjo is just an amazing game for the system, and no wonder people want an actual third.
I mean, the top
Or
four,
at least
which
a
I
new
think we can all assume that we know from here on, they're all very
Yeah.
close in quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Banjo is a very different type of platformer than Super Mario 64, and they both have their own strengths, and they lead into their own strengths really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. All right. What got us to number 3?
I'd be surprised if this isn't Majora's Mask. Like, maybe somehow it crept higher, but I think this is the right place for it.
That's where I have it, and I know I've been going opposite of John just for variety's sake, but I can't. I'm pretty confident.
Well, this
it's
is
right
where we're
here.
going to be wrong.
Yeah. At number 3, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask with 6,252 points.
Whoa.
Good God.
I do think this is the right place for it. Majora's Mask
agree.
is a really unique, phenomenal game. Without Ocarina of Time, though, like they have their own strengths and weaknesses. Majora's Mask is a brilliant, tight game about like learning the world, learning the characters. It doesn't thrive in the dungeons so much as like a traditional Zelda. So there's parts that Ocarina of Time just kind of, if you haven't played that game already, I feel like you're itching for something that's missing. Whereas Majora's Mask just does something different, and it's great at doing that different thing. But I think this is the right spot for it, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's similar to like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Tears doesn't exist without Breath of the Wild, even though in the case of those two, I think Tears is the better game. Yeah, I didn't get to Majora's Mask until I was in my teens. I got the game. My cousin let me borrow the game, but didn't give me the memory card that you need to play it. So
Oh no.
I couldn't play it.
Oh, the
so
expansion pack, you mean?
Yeah, yes, the expansion pack.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just couldn't play the game. So I didn't get it until my teens on the Wii Virtual Console, and I think that elevated the experience for me in a way. Because Ocarina of Time at that point was my favorite game ever. So getting to play a direct sequel to that game so many years later in the exact same style, same visual fidelity, was a very special experience for me. It was like a lost piece of history had made its way onto my system.
The asset reuse is like a core part of the identity. Because it's like a twisted version of reality. It's like a mirror Hyrule. So seeing all these familiar characters who aren't the same but look the same it adds to that. And I don't think any other games pulled off asset reuse quite as contextually great as that.
The closest might be one of the Yakuza games, the
I guess
Yakuza
so,
series in
yeah.
general. But yeah,
Yeah, just being able to form a new world out of so much of the same stuff.
yeah. Majora is such a difficult one for me because at least on Nintendo 64, I remember borrowing it somehow, because I did the same with Ocarina, but borrowing it somehow, having that opening sequence play out where it's just like, this is amazing. Look how like Link's riding off the horse. It's like action packed. You have all these crazy flips when you're heading to the main bit. And then you have the initial 3 days. And I'm like, I am freaking out. The time is running out. I don't know exactly what I need to be doing. That moon's getting closer. It's too much stress. I can't find a save point because when I started playing it, I only had so much time to play it. So I'm like, what do I do? And then I there's too much stress and I just shut it off and never touched it again.
A lot of people are like that. A lot of people just find this game too stressful.
Yeah. And then I tried it again on the 3DS and it completely clicked. Loved it. It's one of the top Zeldas for me. But here's the interesting thing. As part of the game club, Majora's Mask came up, and so I played the N64 version for the first time, and I made a point to not use a guide or anything. I don't really like the N64 version.
Which is like a little bit unpopular.
I know it's very unpopular, but I think it's because I experienced the 3DS version first, because the 3DS, the N64 version is just not as clear. I didn't have an idea of where I wanted to go or what to do, and it just never came across as
you have to
want before, and a lot of people like that. Like Majora is just like, oh, I'm going to beat the hell out of you, and I don't like that aspect. I guess I like Majora as a concept, and it's on 3DS, but the N64 version just something I miss something.
You have to go into an experience like that wanting to get lost, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's something that keeps people from playing a game like Outer Wilds, where that game doesn't tell you anything.
Mm-hmm.
The act of figuring it out is, for me, the gameplay. Like, that's what engages me. So something like Majora's Mask, charting out where everybody's going and what they're doing, coming to those solutions on my own, that's where the enjoyment for me comes, but it's not for everybody.
It's interesting comparing it to 3DS, because I think the 3DS is a lot more comfortable in being a regular Zelda game. There's some things it just does weirdly, like Zora swimming and like shooting ice and it being like a predetermined place. But if you just want to do the dungeons and beat the game, I think 3DS is the better experience in that way for most of it. But if you want to, just dive into the world and just do everything, which I think is where Majora's Mask actually thrives. N64's my place for that, but there's I don't think it's that strong as just a regular Zelda game though. Like, there's 4 dungeons and not outside the Stone Temple, maybe they're not very memorable. The water one I don't think is very good. I think it's just a fine Zelda game, but it's a great exploration of broader Zelda.
Yeah, Majora's Mask 3DS is great if you just want to play it, but if you want to have an experience, I guess, and you have you have to go into with a very certain mindset on the N64 version.
Yeah,
so that makes sense.
They both have their strengths. I hate when people say one version is bad over the other one. They've got 2 different audiences, and for me, I actually like both of them. I think the 3DS version is gorgeous. Sometimes limited fidelity can make a game that's supposed to feel scary be scarier.
Yeah.
But they filled in the gaps really well in the 3DS version, and stayed true to what Majora's Mask was from a visual perspective, and I think that's really impressive and should be noted.
Yeah.
But they're essentially 2 different games at this point.
Very much.
But
So.
I think there's place for both of them.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're down to our top 2. So, Brandon, John, what is our number 2 Nintendo 64 game of all time?
This is Mario 64.
Yeah, I could see an argument for it being number 1, but I'd be shocked if it's not here.
All right. So you're calling Super Mario 64 for our number 2 Nintendo 64
gotta
game of all
be.
time.
Yeah.
At number 2, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time.
What? Really?
Yeah. This is
No
probably going into this.
way.
This is the least shocking list that you could ever expect of this. And we get a swerve like this. So obviously, Mario 64, number 1. To put the numbers out there, Majora's Mask, 6,252 points. Ocarina of Time, 7,740 points. Mario 64, 7,857 points,
It was pretty
only by
close.
100 plus points. It is
Wow.
that close.
Wow.
So yeah, I was shocked. Ocarina of Time is widely considered for years to be the greatest game of all time. It
Yeah.
was just always in that conversation. And it got a lot of number ones, but I think Mario 64 just appeared a bit more on all over the place.
I guess that makes sense. Like Mario
Yeah.
64 is the Nintendo 64 game. If you had a 64, you probably had Mario 64.
Mm.
So by pure volume of people who've played it, I think that makes sense.
It's very interesting. You're right. For decades, Ocarina was considered the best game. I think for some it still is.
Mm-hmm.
My personal tastes have shifted. I don't think this is the best game anymore. I love it a lot, but I think there's been other games that have surpassed it, and many argue whether it even surpassed A Link to the Past at the time. Ocarina is so ambitious though for what it was doing. Like compare it to anything else in any other system. Like compared to Final Fantasy VII, compared to Panzer Dragoon Saga, this was in another field. Just being able to walk out in full 3D into Hyrule Field, walk around the world. It was our first like real taste of a 3D open world.
It's our first real adventure.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
all the dungeons are still great. Even the water dungeon's great. People talk they blew that up too much. it's fine.
Yeah.
Everything's memorable. The Shadow Temple is memorable. Going in Lord Jabu Jabu's stomach is memorable. It's just a game full of memorable moments without anything lower than that, really.
Yeah. It's
Ocarina of Time's dungeons, we said this before, but I do think they are significantly better than Majora's Mask.
Yeah, it's not even debatable. Every dungeon in Ocarina is better than every dungeon in Majora's Mask.
Straight off the bat, the very first dungeon, you're it's not a long time before you're straight into the Deku Tree and you got your first dungeon, and it's already doing some amazing things at the time where it's kind of mind-blowing that you're using fire to burn away the web, or that final jump where you're jumping all the way down in order to have enough momentum in order to break the web and get into the boss's
It's that
chamber.
early like Breath of the Wild experimentation of like can this thing work, and it does, you know?
Yeah. It's I think Ocarina benefits too from having more dungeons than Majora's Mask. So, they can tune that experience a little bit more.
Yeah.
Spread the difficulty and the complexity of the dungeon's puzzles over the 7 or 8 that are in there versus the 4 that you have with Majora's Mask. But Ocarina of Time is also, and I said this with Paper Mario, this is just a pure good versus evil story, and it's hard to get better than that.
It's a unique twist on it too, because it is just good versus evil, but it's also a world where the evil wins halfway through the game.
Yeah,
and it's like you get like people talk about Majora's Mask's world, but Ocarina's world is great too. Like you get to meet all these characters as a kid, and then you grow up, and like time has changed them. They've been taken down by evil, and you've got to like win back each region one by one.
Can you imagine? Had we not known that Link was going to become older in the game before playing it for the first time, and having that complete shocker when you pull out the Master Sword and suddenly you're tall.
Yeah.
That would have broken brains.
You're tall and hot.
Yeah. But then you wouldn't have the title screen of Link riding on a Epona. It would just be like young Link walking through a field with the logo.
Yeah. Rolling and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was just... It's an adventurous aspect. I distinctly remember trading the just for like a week or two, my PS1 and my copy of Final Fantasy 7 to my friend who had a Nintendo 64 and Ocarina of Time, and we got to play each other's, games, and just being blown away because I played a little bit at mall kiosks, like at
Yeah.
the Deku Tree or the Hyrule Field. But to actually go through the experience, figure everything out, get each of the dungeons, it was just like, oh, I'm a Zelda fan now.
Time hasn't changed either. This isn't a game that's aged. There's like some performance stuff, like especially in the PAL game, it runs like 17 FPS or something. But if you go to the 3DS version, it just feels like every other Zelda game that followed it, like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. It plays like they didn't really advance the mechanics that much. And Ocarina is just this masterful, masterful game.
I mean, you look at the 3DS version, and it respects the original N64 game so much.
Yeah.
Keeping those glitches in there. Funnily enough, like a couple days ago, a short came up on my YouTube account. It was a side by side of the original game and 3DS, and they were running through Kokiri Forest, and it was identical: speed, game feel, everything, like 1-to-1, no difference at all. And I was like, wow. That's how much the original game holds up, that they didn't have to touch stuff like that.
Yeah. This could have, maybe even should have been number one. It's just a brilliant game.
It makes sense to be. I mean, it figured out 3D combat, set the standard for that, figured out 3D worlds.
Yeah.
It's from what they were originally planning to what they've pulled off. It's such a major accomplishment. You can see why it would be the number one on the N64. Number one of all time? Hard to say anymore, but I guess that'll come down to the votes when we get to that point.
Yeah.
But let's talk about our number one, Super Mario 64.
Also masterful. What's interesting about this now is I think this is still one of the games to show people who haven't played games. My daughter dabbles in games every now and then. But a few days ago, she wanted to play Mario, and so I put Mario 64 up on NSO. And she was just walking around the castle gardens and just laughing at everything, like laughing at climbing a tree, swimming through the moat and being like, look, I'm swimming in the castle river. And I think the camera, while it can be a bit restrictive today, it's also one that you don't have to manipulate much. So if you're someone playing a 3D game for the first time, you can ignore that camera for the most part. And it's very good at that. So not only was it a great introduction to 3D space as in its era, but I think it's still a great introduction to 3D space.
I agree, because I had my son try it out a little bit, and he loved running around, exploring things. He figured out how to jump in the levels. He was figuring out the moves. I just show him a little bit, and he'd take that and run with it and figure it all out. He loves the bob-bombs. There's bob-bombs chasing you and then blowing up. It's the funniest thing in the world to him. But I agree. It's all of our introductions to kind of 3D platforming.
Yeah.
I often see takes these days of people saying that Mario 64 does not control well. And I look at them and I'm like, you're insane. Mario 64 is still, to this day, one of the best feeling and controlling 3D platformers ever made. To this day.
You're right. There is like a momentum feel to this. And I think maybe people are getting hung up on wall jumping being a bit weird, because wall jumping is a bit weird. But the actual controls feel so good. When you can pull off all these jumps, nothing feels better than just like pulling off this just radical feat that you just sort of push yourself into. Anyone who's watched a Mario 64 speedrun knows what the controls are capable of, and you don't have to be a speedrunner to pull that, to feel good at that. You can still just do a triple jump and somehow wall jump into a thing, and you can make your own path. It was the first expressive platformer.
Happens to make it, and all that.
Mario 64, I think, is the only platformer, maybe save for Super Mario Odyssey, where I can make Mario do exactly what I want him to do every time.
Right.
Yeah.
And you compare it to other platformers in the era, look at Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider is a very rigid game by design. But then you could go to Mario 64, and it's like, whoa, the analog stick actually, when I push it, it takes Mario where I want him to go. It's as simple as that. I can't think of a single other game, other platformer, before Mario 64 that did what it does.
They were still trying to figure it out, and
Yeah.
Nintendo managed to get it worked out. It's like how they wanted it to control, and ended up just making a classic. I'd argue that the last set of levels are not great.
I was going to come to that. Yeah, like
The
Rainbow
level
Ride,
quality
not
does
great.
dip toward the end,
Yeah.
but there's some amazing ones up to that point.
Yeah. I also think playing this with an N64 controller makes a big difference.
Yeah.
The people they rag on it now, but the N64 analog stick has a very large set of space to move in, and I think that's lost now with emulation.
It's like little to no dead zone on that stick.
Exactly, it's really easy to walk, to move a little bit, to run. With a modern controller, that's actually quite tricky. It's quite tricky to get for like a middle space. But yeah, that's also a thing with Zelda aiming. Try aiming with a Pro controller on Switch is pretty tough. Try aiming with an N64 controller, still not ideal, but it's a lot easier.
For sure.
Yeah, that's kind of a lost thing now.
Yeah.
I think it's a testament to Super Mario 64 specifically how much in the conversation it still is, especially in the content creator space. People still play Mario 64. They speed run it. They mod it. Like
It was a big deal when it was cracked for the PC and did all these crazy things that now you have like multiplayer Mario 64 and all these other fan mods. Like it's a game people go back to and discover more to do.
Mario 64 is a game that I think people will still be playing when I'm old and retiring, and my kids are going to have kids and they're going to be playing Mario 64. I don't think it's ever going away.
No,
ever.
I don't think so. There's just so many memorable stars in this game too. Like in One's Fortress, just firing yourself into the corner of a pillar. It's obtuse, but we all somehow worked it out. We all somehow did it.
I remember the first time I figured that out as a kid, and just it blew my mind. I was like, I can't believe that worked.
The races against the penguins down those slides are some of the most nail-biting moments I remember as a kid, because you got to have the speed, but you got to have the control. It's like, nope, I'm just right off the edge. There I go. And
Mario 64 is also the first game ever that I completed. And I've beaten plenty of games, but Mario 64 was the game where I was like, I'm getting every single star.
Yeah.
And when I finally did that and got on top of Princess Peach's castle and saw Yoshi up there, I felt so proud of myself. I was like, I did it. I'm up here.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to be up here since I first landed in, the castle gardens.
It's so tantalizing, that roof. I remember before even seeing like videos of people getting onto that roof, I was trying to get up there. I was trying to like jump onto the hedge and go over it. You just wanted to do it, and then you finally get the cannon, and you can finally do it without having to do some crazy jump.
It's a classic. I mean, you can't argue with it.
Yeah.
Like these are formative 3D games in their spaces.
Yeah.
So
if they ever pulled a Mega Man 9 with Super Mario 64 and just took that existing game, like, don't even change it. Maybe adjust the camera, actually. But then make a new game around it, I'd buy that in a heartbeat. Yeah. I'd be so happy.
That'd be cool.
Earlier in this list, I was saying how like Smash 64 and Melee were 2 years apart, and in my eyes, Melee just does so much more. With these two, it was an example of the N64 doing more. Like Mario and Zelda, people love Wind Waker now. I think it's still a great game, but comparing Mario Sunshine and Wind Waker to Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, it felt like a step back in many ways. These were like the pinnacle of games, and those were like more iterative, experimental, but don't hit the heights that these two did. And these define the N64 in a way that kind of plagued the GameCube because of that.
It's unfortunate in the case of both Sunshine and Wind Waker, since both of them were kind of rushed to launch.
Yeah, they were definitely rushed.
Even that aside, I think you're right. I don't think that changes the narrative very much. They are iterative, and they don't exist without these ones before it that arguably do it better.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is our top 10 list. I think pretty solid overall.
No F-Zero
Obviously,
X.
there's
That's I think, and like I think F-Zero X, Pokemon Snap, Sin and Punishment. I think those are like the big omissions, but there's a few.
there's definitely some fan favorites or like personal favorites in here that just didn't quite make it in there.
Yeah.
And that's where you kind of get into the little bits here and there. So I like PlayStation, I will run down the rest of the list about how to show how everything else did. At number 11, Kirby 64 missed it by 200 points. It was 1,574 points.
I don't like this game very
So-
much.
It's a cool game. I respect mixing elements. I think it's neat, but I think I'll put it a bit further back.
Yeah, I think Kirby fans like it because of the mixing mechanic, but I think the more people play it, the more they realize it's fine.
Yeah,
I still like it. I think it's a
good
play
game. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
short and inoffensive.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
there's that. Number 12, losing to Kirby by 22 points. Pokemon Snap.
Still one of the best Pokemon games ever made.
It really
Yep,
is.
finally got a sequel.
Yeah.
13, Mario Party 2 with 1,422 points.
Mhm.
Daniel's not here, so I get the moment. Mario Party 2's still one of the best Mario Party games, and I'm glad that it was the highest among the three.
Number 14, Banjo-Tooie.
Mm.
So
Another one where
it
if
might-
Daniel was here, he'd probably be yelling.
I think it might have gotten a bit of a boost thanks to the NSO release recently
Yeah.
ish.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Number 15, here's F-Zero X.
Should
I think the issue with
That's a shame.
here's the issue with F-Zero in general, John. They're hard.
They
They're
are
hard, and it makes it hard to
So is Diddy
enjoy
Kong.
sometimes. Yeah, but Diddy Kong has a cutesy package around it.
Here's my
Water
pitch. Here's
appeal.
my pitch. We ignore people's votes and we trade F-Zero for Mario Kart.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. Mario Kart's not even in my top 20, I don't think.
That's fair. Number 16, Mario Party 3.
Okay.
So not too far behind too. Number 17, Donkey Kong 64.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's
No sin and
good.
punishment, but okay.
Number 18, Perfect Dark.
Cool. Yep.
So good placement there. Number 19, Pokemon Stadium 2.
The mini games hold up. Mini games hold up.
Mini
so
games
well.
hold up. It's a great way to get to battle your Pokemon with that whole system. Number 20, I think a very impressive showing for what it is and how it
Mischief Makers?
eventually got released. Sin and Punishment.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good spot.
No, I mean, I honestly, for the fact that it was Japanese only for how long, that's
Yeah.
super impressive.
And like,
Sin and
yeah,
Punishment.
I wouldn't put it ahead of Star Fox, I wouldn't say, but it is one of the best rail shooters ever.
It is really good.
Yeah.
It holds up so well. 21, Conker's Bad Fur Day.
I'm not a big Conker
22.
That's
fan.
respectable.
Yeah.
Conker's fine. 22, the original Pokemon Stadium.
Cool
23, Mischief Makers.
Nice.
I'm very happy that Mischief Makers made the top 25.
Yeah.
That's a really respectable showing for that game. And I think that is our first third-party game.
I guess so.
Mischief Makers is the highest rated, highest ranked third-party game
Wow.
on the
Yeah.
N64 on this
I mean,
list.
Treasure,
So-
they made Sin and Punishment, but that's a Nintendo IP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
That's crazy.
Mischief Makers, Enix made Mischief Makers. Oh, right. Well, both Treasure.
Yeah,
I see
yeah.
what you're saying now, John.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, number 24, only behind by 13 points. Pokemon Puzzle League.
It's not as
Okay.
good as Powered Upon. Like, it's a nice mix on the genre, but I think
It's a
those sort of
package,
2D clunky pieces don't look as good as the pixel art on Super Nintendo.
It looks
Yeah,
like it
that's
was made in Microsoft Paint.
It does, but it's still cool.
Number 25, Wave Race 64.
Cool.
26, Mario Party. 27, Mario Tennis.
hmm
Number 28, Mystical Ninja starring Goemon.
Another
Nice.
third party.
Love
one.
going on.
Yeah, that's our second highest third party one. Number 29, Yoshi's Story.
Okay.
Number 30, Rayman 2. So
It's
did all
good.
right
It's
there.
good. It came out in 64 first, but it's better on other platforms.
Or
Yeah.
Cruisin' Exotica. Didn't make the top 30.
Nope. 31, Star Wars Rogue Squadron. 32, Harvest Moon 64. 33, WWF No Mercy. And wrestling had a huge presence on the N64.
Mm-hmm.
34, Ogre Battle 64. Very impressive showing for that game.
Yeah,
35, Doom 64.
cool.
36, Bomberman 64. 37, Jet Force Gemini. 38, Mario Golf. 39, Hell Yeah, Snowboard Kids. Beating out number 40, Resident Evil 2 by 1 point.
One of the most impressive
Wow.
ports of all time.
For sure. 41, Pilot Wing 64. 42, Bomberman Hero. 43, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. 44, Mega Man 64. I was kind of surprised it did that well. 45, Dr. Mario 64. Turok
Okay.
2 at 46. Blast Corps at 47. Blast Corps and 1080 Snowboarding tying at 47. And then 49, Snowboard Kids 2. And at number 50, Rocket Robot on Wheels. Got our initial game from the Sly Cooper devs.
I'm a little surprised Mario Golf and Mario Tennis are so far apart. I think that they're pretty equal.
Yeah.
Yeah, one
I
was
would have
just
put both of those games over Mario Party 1.
So would I, yeah, for sure.
for sure. But a pretty decent showing. I know some people might ask, Space Station Silicon Valley 51. So
Oh, okay.
Did any of the Cruisins make the top 100? I'm curious.
yes, Cruising USA
Oh, yeah.
managed to
Cruising
make it. So
Exotica is a
it-
much better game, but okay.
Exotica got no votes. I got Cruising USA and Cruising World, but no Exotica.
Really?
You
Okay.
could
I
have
had
been the
USA
change
and
you wanted
Exotica
to
as a
see,
kid.
Brandon. You could have voted for it.
Look, you could double tap A in Exotica and do wheelies with cars and then tricks, and that's a feature that we still have today on Cruisin' Blast. So
Cruisin'
There you
Blast.
go.
Cruisin' Blast is going to make it into the Switch top 10. Hear it now.
I love that game.
It's
so
a good
dumb.
game.
Yeah.
Resident Evil 2 is an interesting one because I think if you're ranking it from a game, I think it kind of belongs to PlayStation. But as a port, it's so good. Like they crammed a 2-disc PlayStation game into an N64 cartridge somehow.
Yeah.
People were looking at
impressive.
cartridges pretty negatively back then, but
Yeah.
like in a lot of ways, like I still preferred playing on a cart over CD because those loading times were pretty bad.
Yeah.
It could get pretty bad back in the day. So yeah, there is our top 10 N64 games. A massive list. And thank you for voting. Thank you for taking part in this. I'm curious what everybody's thoughts on the results on this one going to be. This one's going to be, especially the top 2.
Yeah.
That's going to be wild to see what ends up happening.
It's crazy, like how kind of thin the N64 library is, but the strongest titles on it are so strong.
For sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like you can
Without a doubt.
talk about how many gaps it has in genres and how little variety it has, but what it does have is just some of the all-time best.
And I think people often, we've talked about multiplayer a lot here, but like they often overlook the fact that the 64 had 4 controller ports.
Yeah.
That was kind of a big deal.
You can play a lot of these games
Made it
forever.
super easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can just play GoldenEye and Mario Kart and Smash and Mario Party endlessly. So it's almost like you don't need other
party
games.
machine. Yeah. You had an N64 if you had a bunch of friends over all the time.
Yeah.
PS1
And-
was a solo experience in my experience.
This is still true to me to this day, but nothing beats sitting down with your friends, playing a game together, and just taking the experience in. Like,
Yeah.
whether it's a co-op game or something silly like Smash, those are some of the most cherished memories ever, and that hasn't changed. They still are.
Yeah, for sure. But that'll cover it for the Nintendo 64. Next time, John and I are going to get to talk about the top 10 DOS games of all time. So It's like an early PC stuff, different from the ones with the 80s PC stuff, where it's sort of like dedicated PC hardware stuff things. This is the DOS format, which has a wide variety. I think around 1,400 different games available for it. So there's a lot of stuff in there. You might have played a DOS game and not realized it. Doom
Yeah.
is like the big one almost. So
This isn't a DOS game, but shout outs to Space Cadet Pinball 3D. You're my homie.
Oh, its
Played a
time will
lot of you.
come. We can vote for that in the modern PC.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
when
I
we,
will
yeah,
be
when we get
doing
the
that.
when we get the 90s Windows, that's its time to shine. Because I'm gonna have a separate thing for Windows in there. I'm trying to go easy on myself because the counting on PS1 and N64 damn near killed me. So we got DOS, and then after that will be 80s arcade games because they need to
Love
have
it.
their own sort of separate section, or else I'm pretty sure the 90s arcade games, fighting, beat 'em ups, all that stuff is gonna just overtake it.
Yeah.
So
Though I want to see a lot of light gun games in the arcade list. So vote for your Time Crisis.
Ooh.
Vote for your Point Blank.
there we go. Let's do it. All right, everyone. I think that covers it for our top 10 N64 games of all time video. Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/gvgaming. But even just subscribing to the channel and ringing that bell helps us a ton. So until next time, bye.
We can talk again.
Hello,
Oh,
gamers.
that was a long one.
That was a long one. We talked about each game much longer than we usually do.
About as long as we always talk about for like number one game, because typically we only keep it to like 2 or 3 minutes for each, but we had comments.
My bad, gamers. I probably extended the length just by virtue of being here.
Nah, that's fine. It's all good. So oh gosh. But yeah, that is the N64.
I'm surprised at how close I got.
List. Yeah, you were always like one before for that. I'm gonna have to run very quickly though, because I had Ryan looking after Kai, and I think he's about to go nuts.
All right, let's wrap this up then. Thank you, live audiences, for joining us. We appreciate it muchly.
Smooches for everybody.
Smooches all around. All right, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. I will try to get the PS1 stuff up as hopefully tomorrow. It's gonna be might be a late night. We'll see how this all goes.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.